Hello and welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, the podcast show where I interview the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity and inclusion to help inspire, educate and motivate others to make the world a better place. Today I'm joined by Anand Verma. I'm really excited actually today because I know that he's got such a lot of experience when it comes to startups and the digital transformation world, so lots and lots of things to learn. Now, Anand is the founder and CEO of Brilliant Basics, a global design and innovation studios. He's now also European head of digital services at Infosys and YPO. Now, Anand has had a huge amount of experience when it comes to multi-channel design technology, business pioneering. He spent his career at the forefront of the digital industry since 1996. He's founded a number of businesses, supported a number of startups, and watched those SMEs grow and flourish into globally recognized organizations and brands. So thrilled to have him here today. Anand, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Leila. Really appreciate it.
No worries at all. And tell me, and of course, all of our listeners who are joining us today and listening to the podcast show, Anand, a little bit about how you came to be where you are today, for those that perhaps don't know you quite as well as, well, I say as I do. I know we've not met before, but I've done lots of research on you, so I actually knew a lot about you beforehand. So I won't bore our listeners with that. But why don't you explain a little about yourself personally and professionally?
Thank you. And thanks for having me again. So, I have an interesting background. I was born in India. When I was 19 years old, I came to the UK to do my studies. So I did a bachelor's and master's in computer science, and also I did a research in very early days of e-commerce actually. And I'm a product of what I call as Eastern values and Western opportunities, right? So where I grew up in a really modest circumstances. My dad worked for Tata Motors, which actually owns Jaguar Land Rover, as we were talking about earlier. And I'm a product of a really modest background. I'm one of 5 siblings. I'm the youngest one. I always had the opportunity to be an entrepreneurial soul. I was quite creative growing up. So I was good at drawing and putting 2 plus 2 together to make 5. But because of, my eldest brother, I got influenced by mathematics and computer science, and I'm a good mix of kind of art and science, or, magic or logic as they're called. I came here in the UK, I did my studies, like I said, and I had to find my own ways with very little support. So being innovative, being creative was the only way to kind of survive. And, UK has given me a lot of opportunities. And my very first job was to work with a startup, a Chinese startup based out of Hong Kong. Very early days of .com boom was happening in 98, 99. And I became their chief technology officer in 1999, traveled the world at the age of 23 in Hong Kong, San Francisco, London, constantly. Every month I was traveling. But that was
Wow.
all the .com boom was about, right? And then .com crash happened in 2001. And I went back to, finding a job in the corporate world. And I climbed the ladder in many digital kind of companies. And I was quite high up at a company called Sapient. And in doing so, what I realized was that I have this unique mix of explaining technology and technology's role in a really creative kind of terminology, a creative kind of description to the clients, but also to the startup world. And that was my kind of je ne sais quoi, I would say, in terms of my special sauce. And I climbed to the ranks at Sapient. And then one day a headhunter calls me and says, hey, there is a CEO opportunity at a very large media company for Interpublic Group. Would you like to interview? I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll give it a shot. And as fortune will have it, I became the youngest CEO of that company. And, that was my kind of corporate story. And, and then I realized that, it's not fulfilling enough for me, and I would love to do something of my own. And that's when I founded a company called Brilliant Basics, which is always about, putting user and the customer at the center of everything that, the market and the brand wanted to achieve and do. And, we won HSBC as one of our founding clients. And the rest is history. We grew. My imagination was that I'll run a 1-person startup for next 5 years to come. But within a year, we were like, 30 people in the organization. I had to find an office, and I had to go and kind of recruit people, and, I had to, kind of raise funding and all those kind of things you go through in building a startup. I didn't have a lot of opportunity to get feedback from a mentor or a chairman in the company. So I had to learn a lot of these things myself. And I made my mission to kind of share these ideas with other startups who are going through the same journey. So the core focus of Brilliant Basics was, kind of threefold. One was what we used to call consult, which is consulting with large enterprises and helping them be like a startup, because a lot of these large enterprises don't move fast enough, and they would like the same speed as Uber and Airbnb, but because of internal kind of silos, they're not able to move fast enough. So one of my mission was to bring that startup speed into large enterprises by bringing customer centricity. The second of the focus was collaboration, which is about, working with startups to collaborate and turn those SMEs that you're saying, that's kind of one person, one woman startup, one man startup into something that becomes really credible for the market. And they need a lot of confidence at the early stages of building a startup, right? It's a lonely journey, and having some support from people like myself helps a lot. And the third part was create, which is about bringing that startup culture in my own company so that we can build startups internally and give that confidence to our employees. So, at the highest level, consult, collaborate, and create was our strategy. And all of these were quite interwoven in terms of the way they work together. And, since then, we have incubated around 12 startups internally. We have supported more than 30 startups, and some of them have become multi-million-dollar startups in last year. And also we have helped a number of large enterprises become really customer-centric through design and innovation, which is not just about the look and feel, but also the business transformation. So I've been really proud of, being part of Brilliant Basics story, because it's quite humbling to be part of a company that grows and you remain, relevant. And then in 2017, a company called Infosys came and bought the company that is Brilliant Basics. And Infosys, just to kind of share the scale, Brilliant Basics was like literally, 60, 70 people company when it got sold. On the flip side, Infosys was 230,000 people kind of company, right? So you can just see sheer scale of difference. And the reason they bought the company was because they were a very tech-focused company and very global, but they did not have the customer proposition capabilities and, that kind of design capability in the company, the user experience, customer experience. And customer experience, they realized, was the differentiator a lot of brands they're working with. So we became the tip of the spearhead for Infosys. And 3 years down the line, I run very large portfolio of Infosys in Europe and Middle East, as well as, trying to grow Brilliant Basics across London, Berlin, Stockholm, Amsterdam, and many other markets. And that's a fantastic job. And every day I kind of pinch myself. So what a job to have. I'm running a Brilliant Basics startup kind of nimble company. Plus I've got the safety net of Infosys, right? Kind of support us on the journey. So yeah, that's a little bit of background about me, but but I'll be here all day if I keep talking about myself. So
this is the whole point of the podcast show. This is exactly what we want to hear about. And I mean, that's just such that is just such a great summary. And especially for, I know the term is overused, but I dare say entrepreneurs in inverted commas like myself, and for others who run SMEs and fledgling businesses, from those kind of swashbuckling pirate stories in the early days to those kind of exciting growth stories. And you're laughing because you know exactly what I mean. Hearing stories like that, where again, it's so much more difficult than what it sounds, but growing as kind of a little tin pot in, kind of out of a little tin pot in the front room. And I have done that with former businesses, to then kind of getting a first office. And the thrill is, it is absolutely riveting. And I think until you've done it, it's really hard to explain that experience and that fear of kind of, I know, I like to call it flying by the seat of your underpants in the early days before you get to that stage. But I think that is, it's just so motivational hearing
You know,
how that all played out. And
100% Leila. And I think, somebody asked me the other day, what do you miss the most about Brilliant Basics? And I said, when we had 5 people in the company, when we were all in one room, tiny, 500 square foot room with around one IKEA desk. And I think for me, that's what I miss the most. What I've realized in my life is I'm a builder, right? I'm not a manager. I cannot be in a, large company. Means I can do it, but I don't think my job, my life will be fulfilled, right? And I think to your point about, having that kind of, the adrenaline rush, right? When you're under pressure and, you're trying to kind of go and get a coffee for the client from outside quickly, make everything you make it look so, seamless and as good as you could. I think those days are my favorite days, right? And when it gets to a certain scale and becomes more operationalized, I think that's where you need to make sure you're surrounded by the right kind of managers.
absolutely. And that is, I mean, that is at its core the epitome, generally speaking, of an entrepreneur. And I mean, I can absolutely relate to that. And I'm sure many people are tuning in today who have either, got, what do they call it now, kind of a side hustle or starting a business or something like that. And they've got that, it's like a gene, it's like an extra enzyme that fits within our DNA that says, oh, the second, it's like your own worst enemy, kind of so much energy to want to build something, but the second you get there, you're almost like, what's the next thing, what's the next thing,
Right.
what's the next thing? And I guess it almost answers my next question to you, which is, had you not thought to yourself that you want to have a break after you'd sold to Infosys, but now no, you're kind of working again?
I think it's not in my, I'm an immigrant here, right? And some, again, I was talking, in another interview at another radio station a few months ago. I had a similar question asked. I've not had a single day break from the day I completed my university. And not that, I'm not looking for a break. I don't think immigrants' minds are designed like that, right? And I say that with a lot of respect to non-immigrant folks as well, that, because of my modest upbringing, my belief is that, if I stop working harder than yesterday, I'll go back to what it was like when I was growing up. Not that I had a fantastic childhood, but I think there's something about giving your best on the day you are giving your best, right? And I think, this is built in my DNA and my siblings' DNA as well. And it happens to a lot of people from India, from China, from Philippines, from, wherever you name it. And I think, this is something that we are designed to do, to give our best that day. And in fact, I'll go mad if I take a break for a few hours, and my mind is constantly ticking. And that's why I said that, the Western markets have given such opportunity for someone like me, but also we have kept our Eastern values of modesty, humility, the education first kind of mindset as a part of this. And I think combination of those two, at least for my sake and for my benefit, drives me forward every day.
I think that's it's a very beautiful expression, if you don't mind me saying so, about the Eastern values and the Western opportunities. And I mean, just to hone into that a little, I suppose, with, tiny bit about my personal background, but I know this is very much about exploring you here. Obviously I am Chinese, but I was adopted by white British parents, and my mum and dad, my mum worked for the NHS for many, many years, and my dad worked for a entrepreneur in Hong Kong called Mr. Mark, who made everything from noodles through to tapestry. I mean, literally, he'd do everything. And we always heard stories around the family table about what dad had been up to going over to China or whatever. We were there during the time of British colony. And I think actually, when my brother and I moved to the UK, he was 4, I was 6, went to a school in Harrogate, which was a very middle class white school. Children had not seen a Chinese child, and actually life then was probably a little tougher because of being very different. But my father, I know, really struggled with the cultural shift of actually coming back. It wasn't so much going out there, but it was coming back. And we absolutely love Britain as our home, and I think this, the world is full of opportunity. But my dad did say, it was very, very different because of that. You know what I mean, right? Is that cultural shift coming away from very, very different ways of thinking and ways of approaching business. the work ethic in a way is very, very different. And it's almost, as you explained there, it's, is it almost that it's almost like an immigrant mindset. And I mean that,
Yeah.
not just physically necessarily, because like my dad coming back, and for me it was always, it's just ingrained in you to work hard. I mean, I know you are far more intelligent than I, but
No, not at all.
no, honestly, but I know I'm not the most intelligent, but I know that I can outwork other people. So when you talk of the secret sauce, I'm like, well, that's my secret sauce.
And it I think this is what we are seeing actually, Leila, because, skill sets have limited value today for a limited amount of time, right? So I always say this to my team, learning ability and the right attitude is far more important than having a skill sets that defines you for a short amount of time. And especially in the digital world where, and we'll talk more about it, hopefully, about diversity and other sectors, but digital world, ability to learn new things, ability to unlearn, and ability to relearn is what defines my team to be a better team than a competitor who might be sitting on their laurels for a long time, right? And I think attitudinally, if because the things are changing, there's so many new jobs that are coming in today that did not exist 10 years ago, and more to happen in next 10 years. And what defines people is their ability to go and kind of learn things, both from a critical thinking, problem solving, all the way to skill sets like, artificial intelligence, right? And I think, to your point about hardworking, I think hardworking allows you to constant be on that learning path, right? Like, our parents used to do that at the same company for 30 years, 40 years, right? Now the company is the world, right? Company is the, the digital environment that we operate in, where things are changing constantly. And the only constant is the change itself. Is your hard work, your ability to learn, to your point, is so much more, attractive to an employer or a CEO or a founder like me than just having a skills that you think that you're the best in the world for that particular skill.
I couldn't agree more. And what you're describing there is kind of almost a perfect example of this humility and the Eastern culture that you describe. Because no matter how much money you make, whether you sell out to one of the biggest globally recognized companies and still say, oh, it's, small business, 50, 60, 70 people, etc. It's that humility that almost says, I'm never going to take this for granted. Actually, tomorrow, it's almost that fear of it could all be gone. So why would you ever want to stop learning? And why would you ever want to take this for granted, rest on our laurels? I'm not saying enjoy the journey and say, yes, we've really achieved something here and achieved it with the team, but to continually keep going despite of all of that, it's a very, very unique trait. And as you mentioned there before, of course, you've had a really interesting personal background, and on the subject of diversity and inclusion and belonging, which I think in one way is really never more important than it is right now, given the coronavirus and the fact that we are living in very, very uncertain times. People are being forced to go online if they were not utilizing tools like this so much. And I think what's been interesting in a way is, I have seen from a lot of our clients is either, those that have thought, oh my goodness, diversity and inclusion, maybe it goes a little bit further back in terms of the priorities right now, and others who have been completely polar end of the spectrum and said, what, actually inclusion right now is the most important thing ever. This needs to be on the very top of our radar. It needs to be something where we're looking after people, their mindsets, we're really sharing, we're collaborating, etc., etc. And again, a very small example, I suppose, of how digital can really affect diversity, inclusion, mindset, wellness, our feelings of belonging and community, etc. But I wondered your thoughts around digital and diversity and inclusion and belonging. Now, I know that's a very big broad term, because we said before the podcast started, actually, this is so much more than just race, gender, socioeconomic background, blah, blah, blah. This is mental health. It's all those invisible diversities. But from your experience, I wonder, how do you think there could be How do you think the diversity, inclusion, and belonging world almost could and can be affected by the digital age? And are there any specifics that you think we ought to be considering around that point and the relation between DIB and digital tech, AI, etc.?
Hmm. I think it's a massive kind of area and focus, and hopefully I can do justice by sharing some of my points of view in this space. First of all, I think, to your point about diversity, it means many things to many people, right? So if you go to a CEO of a large company, diversity for him may mean that there is a, good equal representation on the board from a male and female perspective. Diversity in a company where, equality for, unconscious, bias point of view, or having a point of view on disability, or having a point of view on mental well-being of people. So I think the definition of diversity and inclusivity is not a single definition, and it needs to be an evolving feature in every company, right? That's one thing I would kind of share. Having what we have realized at my company, Brilliant Basics, is it's not a pipeline problem, it's an intent problem, right? So I think it needs to be felt from top down, bottom up, that look, we are a people-led company, right? So in Brilliant Basics, we say we are people-led, product-focused, planet-conscious, right? So this is our 3P strategy, right? So what I mean by people-led is ability to kind of treat everybody respectfully, right? Ability to say, you know what, together we are stronger, together we are better, right? And the reason we say that in a design digital innovation company is, if in fact our end product is better when people are diverse, because they bring multiple facets of knowledge and learning and ideas and cultures, and it's a melting pot. And we are very lucky to have nationalities from 26, 27 countries in the company, multiple languages. And digital is unlike bricks and mortar, is global from the day you launch a digital product or service, right? So why wouldn't you have diverse people building that and creating it? Because your market share is global, right? And a lot of people don't realize it. And I think they're living in this kind of, very siloed world of, oh, I want one kind of people, or I want one kind of, skill set. I don't think that's fair on the customers. That's first of all, right? And I don't think it's fair on people, because people are yearning for community building, for a social, of course, we're going through some unprecedented times right now, and social distancing is something that we are all promoting for the safety of others. But that doesn't mean we are distancing each other from a conversational kind of, point of view, from building the products and services point of view. So I think, from my perspective, being people-led is always about creating a platform, a mesh or a culture platform that allows everybody to feel safe. That's the first thing. The second, everybody should have a voice to share those ideas, and without feeling, oh, I'm not sure if my ideas are good enough. I don't think that kind of culture is entertained in Brilliant Basics. Thirdly, I would say giving a some sort of approach or process in the project delivery, in the way we work, to make sure that everybody's voices are heard, everybody morale is checked on a regular basis, because that data plays a major role in making the next iteration of the culture better. And culture, by the way, is a byproduct of a process, in my view, right? Rather than having an open culture, if you have a process, everybody start to feel this is what BB, Brilliant Basics, is kind of known for, right? The second thing I would say is, diversity has changed dramatically, right? Since, Greta Thunberg started talking about planet, for example, right? And, I don't know if you followed the World Economic Forum, but
Yes,
Trump and Greta could not be polar apart, right? In terms of their ways of, thinking. And what that has done is created this kind of sentiment that you cannot just run a company on the basis of profit. You got to have a purpose, right? And purpose is, to your point about diversity and inclusivity, but also diversity also means that diverse ideas can also help the planet be a better place for communities, for unprivileged people, for the climate, right? And I think for me, what is really exciting is, if a 16-year-old can change the world, right? Imagine what, my team can do in its own way. So So what we have done internally is we have started to bring together this concept of T-shaped people. So T-shaped meaning you've got a skill set in a product or area, but then you've got the vertical, horizontal line of T, which is focused on being people-led and being planet kind of conscious. So that it's not just one person who's supposed to be diverse. Actually, everybody is diverse in the company, and that's been a biggest change in our ways of working for last kind of, I would say, 2-3 years. We always has this mindset of, hey, BB people will always be nice, right? That's kind of given. We're not like, difficult people in the company, because as soon as people are nice, people become safe, right? That's the kind of first rule of building the company. Now what we have done is we made it much more tighter and said, diversity means this, which means that we create better product, better culture, and better impact for the planet. Not just better design and better digital outcomes, but in fact, something far bigger and far more than, just making our clients, lots of money in terms of the digital products and the outcomes from that.
That makes absolute sense, and that's really inspiring to hear how incredibly eclectically diverse the company is, and that it's managed to remain so. Because I think, that's what I often see, and of course, no business is perfect. It all goes through a different journey depending on which organization we're working for. But I think the difficulty when you have got this really kind of wonderful entrepreneurial feel and personality is that when you start to scale up, is making sure you manage to still keep the the enthusiasm of the founder, which clearly Brilliant Basics or BB has. And I think one of the really interesting pieces that you mentioned earlier was one of the keys to, well, I didn't think you didn't say a key to your success, but you said it was personalization. And I think when and again, I know this is very kind of big picture, and I am certainly no expert in the digital world and what the future will hold, but you think about how fast everything has moved, and the fact that you said personalization there is one of the absolute kind of critical pieces to you being able to grow that organization. Well, personalization, emotional intelligence is one of the only things that cannot be replicated through things like artificial intelligence that you mentioned. I mean, to a degree, maybe through Amazon's Alexa or asking how you are, but right now, we are humans and we are humans alone, and no one else can really replicate that. So whilst process and systems can be copied in abundance, the personal and the humanistic nature of them cannot. So, again, I wonder, and I'm not trying to put words into your mouth here at all, but given that you said personalization was one of the key facets to you really having a strong USP for that organization, was it that you think that really differentiated you almost and really was one of those things that made you very attractive to Infosys and other organizations when you exited?
No, that's a brilliant articulation and question, Leila. So thanks for kind of nudging me that way. I think, for me, I think the relevance and personalization, I think it's achievable when the company is not large enough. Because, when you have a 250, 300 people company, you can still kind of put a name to a face, right? When you've got 230,000 people company, you put a number to that face, right? And I think, what we've been trying to kind of uncover in last kind of year or so is through things like AI and things like machine learning, how to kind of make that augmented information to a manager or a senior manager to understand people are people, right? They're not like a number. So, I think technology plays a major role if it's used as an augmented device to make an experience personal, to personalization. And of course, Amazon is, incredibly functionally personal, kind of tool, because people want to get from A to B really quickly or order a product really quickly and seamlessly. But when you're running a company, I think to maintain that personal relationship, I think there's far more one has to do, right? Which means that, for example, in my company, I'll sit down with most of the people in a month and say, hey, how are you doing? How's your family, right? And I think this I have been doing for the last 8 years. So when the company had one employee, now we've got more. And I'm trying to kind of always share that experience with my managers, saying, hey, it's worth doing it because it just takes the relationship to the completely kind of next level. But all the Infosys people cannot do that because they're so large, right? And so vast. So the company is run by process. Now, when you're running a company by process for 200,000 people company, then what that does is, that allows you to think about how do you start to capture the emotive sequence of people, right? So we have come up with, in fact, we have invented a new way of doing stuff for large companies, which is what we call as a computational design, right? So it's in fact designing based on the computational data that's available to the manager or the user. Now, what that captures is things like, empathetic value, right? So the value that you get from, with regards to what is your fear factor, what is your motivation factor, what is some of the qualitative data that allows me to, start to understand why are you making this decision the way you're making it, right? And that start to bring some empathetic way of managing, a user or a personal experience with that individual. So can technology play a role in personalizing not just functional value, but also emotional value? The answer is yes, but there is no replacement for having that face-to-face connectivity. In last, we started working from home 3.5 weeks ago. And I can't tell you, Leila, the amount of connectivity and community-like feeling that we have had in our organization last 3 weeks, I hadn't felt like that in last 3 years since I sold the company to Infosys. And the reason behind that is because the enemy is outside. Everybody's come together saying that, you know what, we'll come together as a team and we're going to kind of defeat this enemy out there. And I think that feeling, what, Zoom and Slack and all of those tools are helping us do is bring each other closer to, the situation. I had a call with my team this morning with 78 people dialing into Zoom, 78 people on Zoom, trying to kind of talk about, hey, what is the plan for this coming week, right? What we're going to do. And the engagement scores are just incredible, through this kind of, roof. And so to your point about digital technology, AI, I really believe, even as a technologist and a digital kind of veteran, if I can call myself that, I really believe those are all augmented tools, right? And combine those augmented tools with real life experience, I think we start to look at something really magical. But if we just rely on the tool to do the job, I don't think that's going to be enough for many managers and many companies out there.
That's absolutely fascinating. And again, I have to say, whilst this is a terrible, terrible time for many people and many organizations, I think when you look at the silver lining that is within that cloud and what you said there about digital technology ultimately aiding inclusivity, it's absolutely brought about possibilities that I don't think could or would have happened otherwise. So no, I think most definitely if what comes out of this is a further development on humanity and the ability for us to be able to connect, having 78 people in a virtual room together, unlikely to happen in person. So absolutely make the most of it. And afterwards, actually, and I know we are in the podcast, we'll ask you this, but I'd love to look at doing a panel with you and some of your teams. I think it's just brilliant to really share and share peer-to-peer company-wide knowledge, because ultimately the enemy is outside, and as organizations, whilst business can and is competitive in inverted commas, right now everyone's in the boat together. And so where we're sharing best ideas, best practice, that is what we need to do to drive things forward. And like you say, businesses with purpose, that is imperative, and thank goodness that is not going to change. When you talk about kids like Greta Thunberg and others who have now followed in her steps, it's just absolutely heartwarming what can be achieved. Anand, I'm conscious of timing, and I'm realizing that actually I could sit here quite happily and do a couple of back-to-back podcasts with you. And I'm realizing we haven't got very much time for our lightning round and our summary. But what I would love to do before we say goodbye for today is just to ask you a couple of questions from the lightning round before we go ahead and summarize. But I wondered, first of all, who has been your biggest inspiration? Now, clearly, you kind of said maybe back then when you were, I mean, mind you, CEO at 23, blooming hell, that's crazy. But you said you didn't maybe have many mentors or people that were helping and supporting you at this time. You must have had some inspirations. Who were they? And can you maybe share a little, perhaps they're personal or could be professional, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think, from my perspective, when I was growing up, because I'm the youngest in the family, my brother is the eldest. he was the kind of shining light of the family. He kind of, Olympiad mathematician, got a scholarship, good at sports. He's like good in every area, right? And we, I was very lucky to have his kind of guidance throughout my life. My brother certainly was my big inspiration in terms of, as the youngest in the family, is always kind of saying yes to whatever I wanted to do and not follow the linear career path that 99% of Indian kind of kids go through. And I made a lot of, I wanted to be a cricketer, and I wanted to be an artist, and I wanted to be something else. But and he didn't have those choices when he was growing up because of his responsibilities. But he was certainly the shining kind of light and always a constant source of guidance for me when I was growing up. I came to the UK, with 3-4 pounds in my pocket. I was on scholarship here, so I could, but even like calling him and say, hey, what should I do now, right? What do you think I should be thinking about, right? And he also knew on the flip side that I could kind of, manage through on my own through a sheer kind of persistence, and perseverance was a big part of it. And then, I met my wife now, but girlfriend then in 1997. And she, she, without her, I won't be here, right? I really wouldn't be here. This kind of, sheer force of nature in terms of not just guidance, but giving me strength throughout the even university times to where I am today. And she has been just incredible. And then, number of people you meet on the way, right, who kind of, say, hey, it's okay to fail, or it's okay to, not, there are a lot of ups and downs I've been through, and I think just kind of having that, support and guidance from people that you don't even rely on, right? They just don't even know that they're going to actually support you or kind of tell you something that you remember. So I think, those three, kind of my wife, my brother for sure, and, I would say my mom and dad, who actually worked tirelessly. And I think a lot of immigrant family kind of see this, right? Where mom is a housewife, especially in India, and the dad is kind of working, for the same company for 30 plus years. And that kind of sheer determination that the only thing that matters to them is the next generation is better than them, right? And that kind of focus on education was the means the determination I realize now as a parent, but when growing up you don't realize it. So I think, my mom, dad, my brother for certainly in the early parts, and my wife now, because every decision, my wife is like my best friend. So every decision that I make, I just kind of talk about it. What do you think, should I do that, Veena, or not? And I think just having that kind of point of view and support helps a lot. And look, throughout the process you read a lot. You look at a quote that might be relevant for that day and kind of inspires you in the morning, and you kind of get going. So I can mention hundreds of people, but constantly, it just reminds me where I've come from, where I am now. And for me, money doesn't mean much. Of course, means to an end, but having the ability to rely on people around you, come rain or shine, is so important, right? So yeah, those are the people I would mention. Sorry, it's a long answer to your short question.
No, not at all. And that's such a lovely answer. Such a lovely answer. I mean, I have to, add a couple of pieces here. I bet your big brother is so incredibly proud of you, and also your mum and your dad as well. I think, the culture that you speak of there is just so lovely. And it reminds me actually in a way of my family as well, because they always say, look, doesn't matter what you do, well, I mean, to a degree, don't really care. Obviously they wanted me to go to university and such, but
Yeah.
it was, look, as long as you've tried your best, then that's really all that matters. And don't worry, the amount of times my dad said, look, you failed, bounce back, you always bounce back, it's one thing you're good at, work hard, bounce back again from failure. And finally, your lovely wife Veena, and I bet she is an absolutely brilliant woman. I think for those who are the other halves of entrepreneurs, my goodness, in the nicest possible way, do they have to put up with a lot? Not in, not even, yeah. I mean, when it comes to emotional resilience, entrepreneurs, from my experience, are often, in the nicest possible way, the most emotionally volatile of all of the characters out there in the world, because they're constantly rocketing backwards and forwards from one thing to another. And so I think a strong partner is absolutely
100%.
fantastic.
I would just kind of add a little bit, like maybe 10 seconds on that. I think, remember, I kind of worked for corporates for a long time and then came back to entrepreneurship, right? And I think having that belief that, when you're used to corporate salary, right, at a very senior level to start a company, and being able to get the level of support from the other half and the guidance, it was not just emotional risk. There are a lot of financial risk that I took at the very late stages of my kind of life, right? And that's why I was kind of mentoring some startups over the weekend, and I always say that if you want to start a business, start at the age of 18, 19, 20, 21, right? That's the best time to start, not at the age of 32, 34 when I started Brilliant Basics, because you've already by that time taken a lot of risks, right? And you don't want to kind of take more to kind of jeopardize your family or your some of the financial responsibilities you've got. So I think to go through all that ups and downs and come out on the other side okay was a big risk for Veena, right? And I think she kind of stuck through all that.
Oh, that's so lovely. That is really lovely. It always helps having one stable part of the relationship or the marriage, doesn't it? Sort of
100%.
my other half always says that to me. He's like, well, thank God one of us has got a stable job, but anyhow, Anand, it's been an absolute delight to have you. Absolute delight to have you on the show, and thank you very, very much indeed for being here. I am very grateful, and I'm sure that our listeners have learned a huge amount from today's show.
Thanks, Leila, and thanks for having me. And it's a great topic, and love to kind of see what you come up with next from I'm your big listener now, so I'm added people.
Oh, bless you. Well, don't go just yet, because I've got a whole number of things I wanted to ask you actually when we come off the air. But just before we go, as I always do, I kind of summarize a lot of the key learning points from the podcast. And I think, Anand, there's been some really unique learning points here, especially for those of us who are entrepreneurs or are thinking of being entrepreneurs, or even those who come from different backgrounds, who are going through challenges, whether it be coming to the UK for the first time or trying to adapt to fit in. I think Anand provides some really wonderfully inspirational nuggets of wisdom there, but also some really practical advice. Most importantly, and I think the quote that really stuck out for me was having those Eastern values and looking at the Western opportunities. We do live in a world full of opportunities, and it's easy to forget that we are in charge of our own destiny here. Only us and our own mind. Yes, with a wonderful support network around us, but we are the ones that create the future. And so remember that you can shape that. And I think, Anand, where you talk there about kind of having this humility and also staying true to your roots. I speak with many CEOs, and Anand, I'm sure you speak with many big old CEOs and SMEs and individuals, and so you meet lots of different kinds of characters. And while success, I think, can be achieved through many different personalities, I think the most inspirational of the leaders who sit there like yourself are those ones that really share with others not only the stories of trials and tribulations, as well as the successes with the teams, but also those ones that really share the humility and not forgetting, most importantly, where we came from. We could enjoy all the success, all the money, all the riches in the world, but really it's only finite, and it's only for a certain amount of time. What really brings us together in this digital age is inclusivity, and not forgetting to always have the human touch, whether it be through just speaking to another or through a medium like this. We should be embracing and harnessing every possible opportunity with which to be able to collaborate and share with one another stories. I think so that's something particular that came out from today, is obviously we're all suffering really with the repercussions and the still uncertain nature of what the coronavirus will hold. But if there's one thing for sure, we're all humans, we all sit in the same boat. So where you can, be kind to one another, be nice to one another, try and reach out, share on digital platforms. Check out Anand as well. He's got some really wonderful business pieces there. And as you've heard today, he's a very humble guy. So, I'm quite sure he'll be very, very happy to answer any questions if you want to reach out directly. Otherwise, do get in touch with myself or one of the team. You can visit us at www.dialglobal.org/podcast or www.leilamckenzie.com/podcast. As always, all the notes will be in the podcast show notes live on our website after today, and you'll be able to check out Anand, Brilliant Basics, and Infosys as well. If you haven't already heard of them, but I'm sure most of you have, since they are one of the global organizations and household names. So thank you again. My name is Leila Mackenzie-Dellis, and you've been listening to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast show with you every week and twice weekly at the moment because of the uncertain times. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much for watching the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast. Please do feel free to hit the like button below, or if you'd like to receive future notifications, do ping the notification bell here at the side. If you're interested in the audio version only, you can find it on the following streaming platforms. Any extra info and descriptions will be in the links below. Look forward to seeing you soon.